It's time for Defending and Commending the Faith with Joe Mott, inviting the atheist, agnostic, and skeptic to examine for themselves the evidence for the Christian faith. We are all limited by what we do not know and by the things we think we know but are not true. Dr. Joe Mott earned his PhD at LSU and was a distinguished math professor at Florida State University for 38 years, helping to write 3 math textbooks and authoring over 30 research articles in math. He is now the host of this radio program, Defending and Commending the Faith. Here is Joe Mott.
Hello to everyone. Welcome to the program. Followers of Christ are still being called into action for defending and commending the Christian faith. When it comes down to the bottom of the discussion concerning the universe, there are really only 2 options. Either the universe was made by someone or something, or it made itself. How can that latter case make sense? It would have to exist before it could make anything. If the world was made and it can't make itself, then let's temporarily assume the world is made by making something. This making something has to be extremely powerful, because it has to be powerful to make what it caused. No cause can give what it does not have. The making something is also personal, because it chose when the universe would appear. That means that the making something is really much more than a making something. We can conclude it is a making someone. Therefore, we are talking about a making agent, a maker, a creator of the world. Since we're told matter, space, and time came into being with the Big Bang, that means the maker is immaterial, the Spirit, spaceless or omnipresent, and timeless or eternal. One can truly say that the credibility of the words, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth," Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, is greatly strengthened by identifying and exposing the flaws of evolution. These attributes are so tremendous that the only viable candidate is the infinite personal God of the Judeo-Christian Bible. Indeed, I have given a philosophical argument on this program that proves that the God of the Bible is the first cause of the universe. An important topic in any discussion of Darwinian evolution is the major problem of blunders, frauds, and forgeries made by evolutionists. How can anyone consider Darwinian evolution to be true if it is characterized by frauds? Would you purchase an insurance policy if the company has the record of frauds? No. But many people accept Darwinian evolution despite its connection with frauds and forgeries. In the last episode, I discussed 3 questions regarding Darwinian evolution. I will continue that tack again today. The topics of creation and evolution is no stranger to controversy. I made a charge against microevolution producing life. I charge that claim is wrong, dead wrong, ludicrously wrong. Evolutionists may try to counter my charge by referring to the 1953 Miller-Urey experiment. Evolutionists claim that the Miller-Urey experiment proved the building blocks of life, amino acids, could have been duplicated in conditions somewhat similar to the early Earth's atmosphere. That spark discharge experiment certainly is a historically significant event for demonstrating that amino acids can form in laboratory conditions that may simulate the early Earth conditions. Question 4. Does the Miller-Urey experiment prove that life can be built by natural process? No. The conclusions drawn from the Miller-Urey experiment are no longer considered relevant by the scientific community. In fact, the experiment has been criticized for unrealistic assumptions about early Earth atmospherical conditions, methodological flaws, and limited applicability to the actual origin of life. When it comes to the Miller-Urey experiment, things continue to go wrong, and its significance for the origin of life question is now perceived as an invalid experiment and irrelevant in terms of justifying the origin of life. The scientific consensus view of early Earth's atmospheric constituents has changed since the 1950s. First, the atmosphere of early Earth was not at all like what the Miller-Urey experiment used. The original experiment assumed a strongly reducing atmosphere composed of methane, ammonia, hydrogen, and water vapor, which was thought to exist on early Earth in the 1950s. Instead, modern research now suggests that the early atmosphere was not a reducing atmosphere, but was dominated by carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and water. These conditions are far less reactive and produce fewer organic molecules under spark discharge conditions. This discrepancy raises questions about the experiment's relevance to natural prebiotic chemistry. So I don't think bringing up the Miller-Urey experiment serves any useful purpose in this context of microevolution producing life. However, some researchers have tried to elevate the Miller-Urey experiment to renewed prominence. Second, connecting amino acids to form a useful protein is a lot harder than just making an amino acid. You may know that proteins are built from 20 standard amino acids that are universally encoded by the genetic code. And sometimes proteins involve two rare amino acids called selenocysteine and pyrrolysine. I discovered new information that over 500 amino acids exist in nature. Hooking amino acids together in a chain to form a protein requires removing the molecule of water from each amino acid added to the chain. But amino acids dissolve in water. This means that although water is a necessary part of the Miller-Urey experiment, the presence of water prevents amino acids from forming proteins. That is a crucial observation. The experiment also has faced methodological criticisms. For example, the glassware used in the apparatus may have influenced the chemical reactions, as later studies showed that using Teflon instead of glass produced different results. This indicates that the original experiment lacked proper controls and may have inadvertently introduced variables that affected the outcome. Additionally, the experiment did not account for the oxidative effects of nitrites and nitrates formed during the spark discharge, which can break down amino acid precursors, further complicating the possibility of producing proteins. Moreover, critics argue that the Miller-Urey experiment's conclusions conflict with established scientific principles. The law of biogenesis states that life arises only from pre-existing life, and the second law of thermodynamics implies that the spontaneous formation of highly ordered structures like proteins is extremely unlikely without external energy output. Therefore, some scientists contend that the experiment cannot be considered valid evidence for abiogenesis. Modern research continues to explore more plausible prebiotic conditions, including localized reducing environments near volcanic vents, but the experiment itself is no longer definitive for abiogenesis. Question 5. Do all scientists accept Darwin's theory of evolution at the cellular level? I think that most scientists still accept some version of the theory of evolution, but a growing number of scientists have become dissatisfied as they learn more facts about the complexity of life. In Darwin's time, some scientific mechanisms had not been discovered yet. For example, most scientists thought the cell was nothing more than a body of protoplasm, a lump of carbon compounds. They also thought that the creation of life was a simple process. At that time, no one knew about DNA, the longest coded sentence yet discovered. At present, the scientific mainstream accepts evolutionary mechanisms as the best supported explanation for diversity and complexity of life, while recognizing that important questions, especially concerning the origin of life and the detailed evolutionary history of some molecular systems, remain active areas of investigation. The disagreement is therefore not over whether cells are extraordinarily complex, they are, but over whether known evolutionary mechanisms are sufficient to explain how that complexity arose. Question 6. Do the changes in finch beaks or the changes due to selective breeding prove Darwin's theory of evolution? Finch beaks changing is only microevolution, which all agree is true. Selective breeding is not, quotes, environmental natural factors, end quotes, as required by Darwin's theory. Darwin's theory includes macroevolution, where species lead to new species. This has never been observed. Question 7. Does the fossil record support Darwin's theory of evolution? No. Darwin predicted that if his theory were correct, there should be evidence that simple life forms gradually developed into more and more complex organisms. Paleontologists generally state that the fossil record does not support Darwin's theory in two major ways. First, animal types tend to appear suddenly, as in the Cambrian explosion, not gradually, as Darwin predicted. Therefore, each animal type is missing its link to its former ancestor. Second, animals tend to remain unchanged throughout their time on Earth, not slowly developing into new forms as Darwin predicted. Allow me to close this episode by reminding you, exercise daily, walk with God.
Thank you for listening to Defending and Commending the Faith with Joe Mott, a production of Wave 94 Radio in Tallahassee, Florida. If you have any questions or comments for Joe, please forward them to Doug Apple at Wave94 at this email address, dougapple@wave94.com. And be sure to join us every Monday evening at 6:45 p.m. on Wave 94 and subscribe through your favorite podcast app. Defending and Commending the Faith with Joe Mott.